Hi, and good afternoon, good evening from me, Jim O'Connell, and welcome to Education Matters on January the 29th. The call-in number here is area code 603, of course, and it's 640-3091. If you're watching live, it's Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. We're live every week on Tuesdays from 6 to 7 p.m. And then this program is repeated at other times. So usually you know when it's live because the phone number is normally printed on this, is up on the screen as you're watching at home. And when it's repeated during its other slots during the week, that phone number is not there. But again, 640-3091. And as always, please feel free to call in. I'm always happy to hear your comments. I've been happy to have received calls from some new callers and listeners in recent weeks. And I'm always happy to listen to you and to what you have to say. It's a forum for people to share their opinions, and so questions, comments. Agree with me or disagree with me vehemently or not, please feel free to call at any time. So there was a school board meeting last night. I find it, with all due respect to everybody, I find it increasingly difficult to sit through another 4 hours, and I question. There are only so many blocks of an hour in a day, let alone blocks of 4 hours, and given the seriousness of the issues that we face, it doesn't always seem like the best use of time. So, as usual, we have a lot of things going on in our district, but let me just start with a positive piece of news. There was an article written this week by Mark Hayward of the Union Leader, who wrote a story about another wonderful student from the city of Manchester who is doing remarkable things. And if I have the Union Leader up here, which I do, I'll be able to find this in a moment. But of course I scrolled away from it. Yeah, so this is under Mark Hayward. Mark Hayward writes an article, I think, on a weekly basis called City Matters. And the title of his article is "Tough Manchester Neighbourhood Has Raised a Cello Prodigy." So the young man's name is Rory Cunningham. As according to Mark's article here, he says Cunningham was a Manchester kid living in a single-parent home in a centre city where gunshots sometimes make for night music. His only instruction involved YouTube videos and a few group lessons at Hillside Middle School on rudimentary topics such as finger placement and bowing. I'm very happy that this article was written, and that Rorik gets the credit that he deserves. He has soloed with several New Hampshire symphonies, and played regularly with the New Hampshire Philharmonic. Last summer, he toured Asia and played Carnegie Hall with the National Youth Orchestra. There's an example of, first of all, a wonderful young man. And so the credit rightfully rests with him, and the combination of his God-given talent and his own determination to work hard and to succeed. So I am always impressed by both the number of young people we have in our city who achieve extraordinary things on the athletic fields, in the fields of academia, in music, in the arts. And last week I talked about a young man from Manchester who ended up being the number 2, the second draft pick in for soccer. and he was drafted as a second draft into the MLS. And here we are this week with an example of another student from Manchester. The article is wonderful. I'm glad it was written. However, I think more credit needs to be given to the Manchester School District and what the public schools in Manchester do, and what they did for this young man, and what they what they do for many others. Because at the time that this young man entered Hillside Middle School, there was the music teacher there, Chris Noyes, was busy as a newer teacher. Assembling in the orchestra and bringing these kids of all different talent levels, and many of whom, including this young man who hadn't had a lot of exposure to music and musical instruments. And here's an example of what the music program at a school like Hillside could do, and those Mr. and Mrs. Redmond who teach there, and Chris Noyes who was the orchestra teacher. So great. And then on to Central High School, and of course at the Manchester, this young man also was taught at the Manchester School of Music. So it's great to see. I think though it's important that we stop for a moment and we think that given the constraints that we have, how many kids sort of fall off the table, so to speak, or are not given the opportunity, who don't have that one moment because we don't have the manpower, the programs, etc., in place that we ought to have. And that should be a great concern to us. So while we can sort of bask in the reflected glory of the achievement of some of our students, and rightfully so, we should be proud of them and proud of what our school system does. But we should have the gnawing away at our conscience ought to be the idea that we have the least well-funded school district in the state of New Hampshire, which I'm sorry it gets like a drum beat, like a mantra, but in the end it's just simply true, and it needs to be repeated. Because when you go and you listen to the school board and they're discussing the bedbug policy or the head lice policy or the wearing hats policy or whatever it is that they're wrapped up in at any given time, compared to the real and serious problems that we have in our district, they're divorced from it quite often, honestly. So I'm delighted to see these successes, but I know the kids that were in the corner of the room that the teacher couldn't get to, or maybe not so much in the corner of the room, maybe right in the center of the room, but because of sizes and class sizes and time, that they weren't gotten to. And the next great celloist, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned the young man we're talking about plays the cello and does so extraordinarily well. Where's the next trumpet player, the next piano player, the next actor or actress, the next photographer, the next potter, the next painter, the next woodworker, whatever? Without resourcing our schools properly, we're not doing them justice. So I have to say that in that regard, we're heading into a budget process, and we have some events coming up. So tonight there was an event tonight. Let me see if I can get to the right date right here, the 29th. So yeah, the at Parkside, the geography was on in the library. It was on, actually, it's past time now, it has finished, but that was on today, as was the Webster Band and Strings Winter Concert. That's an elementary school having their winter concert today. And then there was this afternoon was the Spirit of Weston School, their Spirit of Weston Awards Assembly. So it's wonderful to see kids being recognised and etc. in our schools. On Thursday of this week, the 31st, at from 6 to 7 p.m. at Memorial High School, there's a program called Ed Funding 101. It's a forum. So this is a separate. It's separate from the city, but it's a statewide. One of our executive councillors, Andrew Valinsky, is going around the state and holding these forums to describe the nature of the emergency or the problem that we have as a state with the state funding of our public schools. And he has a lot of facts and figures and data, and that will be at from 6 to 7 o'clock on Thursday the 31st. And then let me see, on next week, on Monday at 6 o'clock is the first of 3 nights. For 3 nights there will be budget forums for people to offer their opinions and thoughts, but also to be delivered to them. They'll have delivered to them the nature of where our budget is and what money is needed, etc. So the first of those is on Monday night at 6 o'clock. And this one is for members of parent-teacher organisations or PTAs, PTOs, PTGs, etc. And this is at Highland Goffs Falls School on at 6 o'clock. And because this meeting is being held, the previously arranged parental involvement subcommittee meeting has been cancelled for Monday the 4th. So on Monday the 4th, 6 o'clock is Highland Goffs Falls if you are in a PTO or whatever. Then the following this time next week, on Tuesday the 5th, there's a Manchester School District budget forum which will be at Memorial High School. As it says on here, it says Manchester School District leadership are preparing a budget proposal for the upcoming fiscal year. The public is invited to hear a presentation of the financial factors and challenges that must be considered. And then again, that's on Tuesday, 6 o'clock at Memorial. And then at on the following day, Wednesday the 6th, there's also a budget forum which will be on at Parkside Middle School at 6 o'clock. So you have Parkside at 6 o'clock next Wednesday the 6th. You have Memorial High School the previous night, Tuesday the 5th. And then if you're an officer of the PTOs, PTGs, etc., there's a meeting for those at Highland Goffs Falls on Monday night. So we'll see what the superintendent has to say, but he when he last spoke about this, he said that we are $2.5 million short of the money that we need just to match existing levels of programs, etc. Now, and that's before we actually offer our teachers who have worked for the last year without a contract, so therefore without pay increases or steps or COLAs or anything else. So we're heading into another school year. Are we really going to ask our teachers in Manchester to forego any pay raise? There may be some that think that that's okay. It doesn't make any sense to me. Just reading the papers in the last couple of days, you may have noticed. I noted a couple of them on here that in Merrimack, the town of Merrimack awarded its teachers a 3-year contract with a 10% pay increase. Did you get that, everybody at home? Back up off the floor, sit on your seat, don't let your jaw drop too far. 10% pay increase in Merrimack for teachers over a 3-year period. So that's about 3.5% or 3.33% per year. I'm not sure how it's broken out. The city of, or the town of Litchfield, also just passed a pay increase for its teachers. The town of Hopkinton is meeting next week to talk about bonding money for school infrastructure improvements, etc. In Manchester, we'll be told by the few people who want to keep their foot on the neck of our public schools that we can't afford it, and that we will continue to be the least well-funded school system in the state, and they will fight tooth and nail to ensure that our programs are not well-funded. And in the end, the ambition will be to see our teachers actually basically fund their own pay increase by reducing their numbers. So, since I haven't said it tonight, let me say it again. For anybody who is just, with all due respects, somebody who's just landed from Mars for the first time, the city with the highest proportion of children to teachers of any town or city or district in the state is the Manchester School District. So we have the highest number of kids in our classes with the least number of teachers, and we spend less per student than everybody else. And we will continue to aggravate that problem. Now, Dr. Vargas, who sadly is about to depart from Manchester after just 2 years, which is very regrettable. But I don't know. I can't see inside his head, and I don't have any special knowledge. But I do know that he was at least willing to speak for the first time as a superintendent in the city of Manchester. He was willing to speak out and call it like it is. I actually thought to myself back at the beginning of this school year in September, when he first talked about the amount of money that this school district was behind where it needed to be. And the most recent number he used was $56.5 million is what we are behind where we need to be. An extraordinary amount, and it's a very simple thing to do. You just if you I'm not sure where he got the 56.5 exactly, but generally speaking, order of magnitude, if you take the number of students that we have in our city, which is close to 14,000, and you multiply it by the average amount of money spent by the average district in the state of New Hampshire, and you multiply those two together, and it gets you in the ballpark of we're spending about $50 million less than we should be spending, and that is felt all across the district in all kinds of ways. And so that's the problem is that someone like Dr. Vargas has been one of the few people willing to deliver that message. It amazes me that we have 28 public representatives and a mayor who nominally represent various parts of the political spectrum, but out of a sense of self-preservation for themselves and ensuring they don't rock any boats and upset anybody, nobody in the city of Manchester is discussing that number. Now, I don't want to be holier than thou or anything, but I've been talking about this number for years. And it doesn't give me any joy to know that that's the way it is, but it does give me some little satisfaction to have the highest qualified and highest paid educator in this, a man with lots of experience, Dr. Bolgan Vargas, who we brought into this district and who's done lots of great work over the last 2 years, to have him stand up and tell these people, our public representatives, and us, the people of Manchester, that we are woefully and drastically underfunding our school system. Now, the question about how that gets resolved, I've said many times, is a difficult question, but it needs to be addressed. Pretending that it isn't so doesn't solve the problem. I'll get back to that, but to segue off of that, we saw in the news today, I think it was, there's a piece in the school there's a piece in the paper today about the Manchester airport and how its number of passengers are down another 112,000 this year, and I'm not sure where I had it before I came on air, but the numbers at Manchester Airport have been declining, and it's the 13th year in a row that the number of passengers flying in and out of Manchester Airport have declined. So if I can just find it here, perhaps we can perhaps I can bring it up. Sorry, just can't put my but it's available at unionleader.com. but passenger numbers are down by 100 and some thousand. It's of the other New. It's the only airport in New England with this year with declining populations. New Hampshire's up by, or Logan is up by 6% year over year. TF Green in Providence is up 11% year over year. Now, you may ask, why are we talking about this on this show? I'll tell you why we're talking about this. To make a straight line comparison is because Manchester Airport suffers from the same problem that our school system suffers from, and that many other things in this state suffer from. We like to pretend it's live free or die, and we have the New Hampshire way, and we've got the New Hampshire solution. The New Hampshire solution is to ignore the problem. And in the case of the airport, which is perhaps the major driver of economic activity in the state of New Hampshire, certainly in the southern part of the state. So the fact that we have gone down to below 2 million passengers per year and heading down towards 1 million a year, where at our peak in a number of years ago there were 4.3 million passengers per year flying in and out of Manchester. And yes, efforts are being made by the new airport director, and Mr. Skelton from the Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce was on today talking about, being quoted today about how a refocus of more advertising for the airport and representing it to local businesses and regional businesses and all the rest of it. But the bottom line is, I've been told for years of people who work. If you go to the customer, at least it was the case, that the customer information kiosk or the tourist information or kiosk at the airport was manned by volunteers and retired people, etc. And they told me over the years that every single day that people would arrive at the information kiosk at Manchester, the now Manchester Boston or Boston Manchester airport, and they would get off their flights, they would walk down, go to the carousel, get their bags, and then they'd walk over to the information desk to ask about the transport to Boston or Burlington or wherever it might be. Or let's say, for instance, to get to the public transport system, like the Regional Transportation Centre in Woburn on the north side of Boston. Woburn is the major hub for both buses, all the buses, and it connects with the commuter rail. Right in Woburn, there's a big parking lot and a big parking area. So people would arrive down every day and say to the people in information, what time is the bus to Boston, or where's the train, how do I get, I've flown into Manchester Boston Airport, I need to get to Newton or Brighton or Charlestown or Woburn or wherever it is. And the answer from Manchester Regional Airport, also known as or otherwise the state of New Hampshire, was, sorry, you can't get there from here. Get yourself a taxi, pay $120. Go on Uber, get paid $90 or whatever it is. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't think that has been a choke point, that hasn't had an effect over the years of people wanting to, to use Manchester Airport, can you imagine for a minute flying to California and you fly into Los Angeles Burbank Airport? And you fly out there and you get to the Los Angeles whatever it is airport, Los Angeles something airport, and they say, oh, well, actually you're in Burbank. Los Angeles is an hour away. And you say, well, how do we get? Where's the bus? We don't have a bus. Where's the commuter rail? We don't have commuter rail. There's no railway? No. There's no bus? No. You could get a bus down to Route 93 to Exit 5, and you can get a bus from there. That's the public transport infrastructure that the state of New Hampshire gives. So it's not a surprise at all. I know that at the time that the first transatlantic flights, Norwegian Air was looking to fly out of a secondary airport in the Boston market, and they chose TF Green at Providence, and they're now flying transatlantic flights as a cheap airline back and forth to Europe. And that went to TF Green. I don't know, I can't be inside their heads as to what the full decision was, but I know that an important part of the decision was that Manchester was in the running because it's a great facility and it's got lots of capacity, but it has no connectivity. And so putting an airline and spending money to bring an international airline into the area, why would you come to Manchester when you can go to someplace that's connected by bus, by rail, etc., down to New York and into Boston and all that? So the issue with our schools is no different. The state of New Hampshire has passed down the cost of our schools to local taxpayers again and again and again. They have their hirelings and supporters and helpers and abettors and aiders here in the city of Manchester who ideologically are opposed to public schools and properly funding them. They're sort of, just anti-public education, suspicious of government, tinfoil hat kind of people who don't want to see the system well funded, and so they pass down the costs. There are people in Manchester who support that, and they vote for people to go up to Concord to pass more costs down to us. It makes no sense to me, ladies and gentlemen. I can't explain it. I don't understand them. I do know that some are driven by ideology, by religious belief, etc., who are anti-public schools because they see them as ungodly, or they see them as whatever. And by the way, I feel bad about even saying the words because it is just a nonsense. But this is the nature of where we are. I don't want to ramble on about that, but I do want to say that the answer is we should be talking about how to solve the funding shortfall, not about how to squeeze more blood out of a turnip. And Dr. Vargas, if he did nothing else, he at least sat in the hot seat under the lights on TV and told the board that they were vastly underfunding our schools. Let's take a call. Good afternoon, caller. How are you?
Yes, very good. A question, Jim.
Yeah.
What is the average class size in a Manchester school, high school, junior high, elementary? What's the average class size?
Okay, so I don't have the number to hand, but I can tell you that it depends on how you I'm not trying to be evasive, but if you actually take the total number of some people will do this and take the total number of teachers and the total number of students and divide one into the other, and you come out with a number, and that number comes out of, my recollection is somewhere around about 15, something like that.
15?
Yes. But that's
okay, now,
that's a deceptive number.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate here for a second.
Please, yeah.
I graduated from Memorial High School in 1971.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
In that school, we had 2,500 kids. Central had roughly about 2,500 kids. West was maybe a little smaller. They had 1,900.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of my classes was 30, 31. I graduated. And then one more thing. If you want to save a little bit of money,
mm-hmm.
When I was in high school, and you could talk to anybody in my age, I just turned 65, we had one principal, one assistant principal. Memorial's got roughly 1,400 plus kids right now. Central's got roughly 1,500 plus kids.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of these schools in the city have 3 assistant principals. Why can't one assistant principal? Now you take 2 principals from every school, assistant principals. There's $600,000 you could save.
I just a small
$50 million that Dr. Vargas says we need.
Yeah.
But when we were in school, in fact, I went to a Catholic grammar school.
Mm-hmm.
We had 40 kids in my 8th grade class.
Right.
Why all of a sudden is it a big thing with numbers today? Why can't a teacher teach 25, 30 kids?
So
I just don't understand.
Okay.
I don't understand it, I guess.
Well, let me just say this.
Explain it to me.
I will. So first of all, I started off to say about the 15 number. So the 15 number is when you take the total number of kids and divide it by the number of teachers, and that's what those who don't want to fund our schools any better than they are would use that number. And that number is used. You can use it to compare to other school districts, and you'll find that we've got a higher ratio than everybody else. But the real number that matters is because that involves special education kids with one-to-one, special programs, etc. If you, if for instance you were to take a grade like, for instance, let's say third. I'm not picking these out for a particular school, but any of our elementary schools, for example, if we were to take a say third, fourth, fifth grade a class at one of those schools, you would find that the class numbers are somewhere in the 25 to 28, 29
exactly
number.
How it used to be.
That's
so
how it is.
I don't understand the problem. What's the problem?
So first of all, the first thing is so that's the actual number of kids per teacher, because it's distorted by, it gets down to 15 when you throw in the other numbers. Now,
let's forget the 15.
Okay.
Let's use 25.
Right.
We'll go 25 to 30 in every class in the city.
Right, and we
What's
don't.
the big deal? It was like that for 50 years.
Yeah, we don't
Why
get.
is it a big deal all of a sudden?
Well,
I guess I just don't understand.
Well,
where you're coming from. Every week, we're underfunded, but we get class sizes. Your words, 15. If you average it out, I'll even give you another 10. Give you 25.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's not go. No, no, please. So first of all, the 15 is just. I was starting to with a longer answer. The 15 is a completely distorted number, but it is the number you get.
Use 25.
But the 25, it would be great if we actually could get to having 25 kids in every class in Manchester. That would be a major improvement.
You just said that the average gets to be about 25.
I said
21 to 25.
I said 25 to 29. So
okay, that's perfect.
Fine. So
when we were in school, it was 30, 31, sometimes 32.
Right.
It's not like it's like 60 now, and and it used to be 30. It's roughly in the same ballpark. What's the problem? These teachers can't teach?
No.
Sure they can. I'm sure they're very capable.
Right. The nature of what
I don't understand what the problem is.
So the nature of what schools do and the nature of the students that they teach is much different than what it was when you were going to school. You're saying you were 60.
You're talking about special ed.
No. I'm not talking about special ed. I'm talking about that too. I'm including that, but I'm also talking about the demographics of the kids that are actually in the classroom. So Manchester is a city. It's got a very high level of for the state of New Hampshire comparison purposes of free and reduced lunch. So I was just looking at numbers today. There are more than 4,000 children of school age homeless in the state of New Hampshire right now. And since about 10% of the population, or a little less than that, of the population of students in the state go to school in our school district, if we use the 10% number, that would mean we have about 400 kids in our schools right now who are homeless. And there are many who are in other circumstances who are not quite at the homeless rate. And by the way, that number doesn't include kids who are in preschool and below, because we're only talking about school-going kids. So, as an example, these things have a real effect in the classroom. So that's the reason why we just simply the other thing I would say to you is this, is that we have gotten to those numbers over time, but we don't do what we did when you were at Memorial High School. If you looked at the number of programs that have been reduced over the years at Memorial High School, so what you've done is if you keep pulling away programs and withdrawing programs. I've talked about at our middle schools, for instance, we normally on paper today have unified arts. I'm sure when you went to middle school that there was
there was no middle school.
Okay,
no middle school when I went to school. Anyway,
all right, but
eighth grade, yeah,
right.
Well,
so
my question is this:
yeah,
I think the city of Manchester is top heavy. Now, perfect example. Memorial's got 1,400 plus kids. They talked on TV. I don't know, one of the programs said last week.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Do they really need 3 assistant principals?
I don't know if
the kids that bad today?
I don't know if there are 3 assistant principals at Memorial. I know there's 3 at
There's
Central.
3 of them. Now, I'm assuming Central's got 3 because they got a little bit more, more kids. Maybe West has 2 assistants because they only got about 800 kids.
I think that's the case. But Central did have 4. We reduced the assistant principals. That's a 25% reduction in assistant principals at Central High School. There are in the buildings at Central High School. there is not an assistant principal for each building, for instance. So when there
I know there's not. I'm just saying,
right.
when I went to school, I had many friends went to Central. It's
right.
one assistant principal,
right,
like we had.
Right. Well,
and he got it all done. They had the same amount of buildings.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I
no,
don't know. I don't know. And I don't know. On another note, okay. I mean,
yep.
I guess we have to agree to disagree.
Right.
Don't think you're going to get anything out of this school board. I've never seen a bigger culmination of clowns in my life as watching these people fight.
Right.
I've never seen more hate for each other.
Yeah.
If Gerard says something, you got 5 other people. Even he could cure cancer, and you'd have half dozen people in that board vote against of what he's going to say.
So you think it's about him? I mean, do you think it's because I'm not saying it's?
Oh, they don't like him because first of all,
No.
in my opinion,
Yeah.
watching these things, he's smarter than everybody else, and
Okay.
they don't like it. We got a
Okay.
mayor that I thought she'd be a little different, but she's not. She was, she's
So-
out of the Obama. They're going to run on transparency, and she's the least transparent mayor we've had since I've been around.
Really, I don't know. I don't know that.
People like Dave Scannell, who just does things on a political note. You got the guy out of Ward 6 he can't even follow the meeting. He wants the kids at Bergeron.
Mm-hmm.
He wants kids to decide what they're going to teach, what they're going to learn, how much money they want to spend.
Right.
It's
So I don't
chaos, and it's not going to change.
Yeah.
It's never going to change. The aldermen are pretty good.
Yeah, the aldermen are good only insofar as they, compared to the school board, they appear to be less dysfunctional.
Well,
but
yeah, I mean,
they
get some pretty sharp guys over there.
Yeah, the aldermen though are the ones who fund our schools in the end, and they're the ones who have our schools where they are. Remember, you can talk to the aldermen, and they all know, because I don't know what business you might be in or what you might have been in before, but you talk to any real estate agent in the Greater Manchester area, including all the real estate agents in Manchester. Just go to there and ask them tomorrow about property valuations in Manchester and families coming to live in Manchester, and they'll tell you, I guarantee you 100%, they'll tell you that property values in Manchester are lower because of the school system. And
I believe it. My daughter moved here from New York.
She moved into Manchester?
Dad, I love Manchester. I'm not moving here. She said the school system's terrible, so she moved to Bedford.
Right. So, and John Clayton, I've mentioned him many times. I don't know if he appreciates it or not, but, John Clayton, who's sort of Mr. Manchester, probably, from formerly of the Union Leader or whatever, he was, he voiced the fact that his daughter was coming back to New Hampshire after having been out of state and had a child, and she decided not to come to Manchester because of the school system. Yeah. So I put it to you. Then is this not a problem that needs to be solved? And
it probably does. And I would think so.
Right.
But
So
I don't know if money's the thing to do it.
Well,
I don't know what it is.
I said
I know, like you talked about demographics. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
But another thing is, everybody in Manchester, including the mayor, hates charter schools. Well, here every week, I sit here and listen. My daughter sat right here listening to how bad everything is in Manchester. Yet,
listen to who?
If a person wants to send their child to a charter school, I mean, they treat it like the guy's, public enemy number one. If you can't get anything out of the Manchester schools because, how you say, they're not funded properly.
Mm-hmm. So the answer is
the person wants what's best for their child.
Yeah. So the answer is simple.
They're not getting it out of the Manchester school system.
So I can tell you.
Why is everybody so against charter schools? I guess I don't understand.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of things you're saying you don't understand. But first of all, you're reaching conclusions that aren't so, right? You've said that people are anti-charter schools. There are more charter schools have opened in Manchester in the last 10 years, and nobody has.
Have, but they don't want to. But no, they don't want to fund them because they're afraid to take away from public education.
Who's they don't want?
A person's paying taxes in Manchester.
Yeah.
And it costs, let's say, a Manchester student costs $10,000 to have their student go to say Central.
Right.
Why shouldn't that student get the parent get that to send their student to a charter school?
Yeah,
they fight them because they say it's taken away from public education.
It is. Now, I'm not an anti-charter school person, but you know that statistically there's no evidence at all that says that charter schools are more successful in any way, or by that matter, less successful than public schools are. So there's
probably not.
Yeah, right. But what it
shouldn't that parent have the right to do that?
Yeah, we could all go out and have our own separate bin collection, and we could all do. We could each have our own piece of a small library or something. In the end, these institutions are foundational to a city like the city of Manchester, or to any community, and they need to be funded properly. What we've done for the last 10, 15, 20 years is we have systematically defunded the public school system. So we've stripped programs out of them, and so our kids go around. They don't have the same opportunities, when it comes to foreign languages, when it comes to unified arts, when it comes to English language learning, English grammar. We have less time in front of teachers than kids in other districts do. You go down to Merrimack, as I've said before, and you go to Merrimack High School, and you have a choice of doing Spanish, French, German, Arabic, and I can't remember the other and Latin, I think. You go to Bedford, and you can do Chinese, and I don't know whatever else it might be, but I know they have Chinese there. You don't get that in Manchester. We've actually reduced the number of languages in Manchester, and we continue. Every time we get to the end of a year, we decide, we're not going to fund it. I don't understand. You seem like a reasonable man. I don't agree with some of what you said because you seem like a reasonable person. I don't understand why Manchester people are not ashamed when they meet their friends in other parts of the state, and they know that as taxpayers they spend less on the kids here than everybody else in the state does. Every single town and person. You can live in any town, in any place in New Hampshire, you'll spend more on education than the taxpayers of Manchester do. And you're not embarrassed by that, and other people in Manchester aren't embarrassed by that. So when you say that they've got smart guys on the board of Mayor and Alderman, I don't know how smart they are. They've overseen the destruction of the Manchester public school system over a period of years.
It's all about schools, Jim. I know you're a big advocate of education, and I commend you for that. But there are people that are barely trying to make ends meet. That every penny can't just go for the schools. Okay. I was going down Union Street today.
Yeah. And
I almost lost the front end of my car with the potholes.
Right.
I mean, the streets aren't that great.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of things.
So let me tell you. But if you go to
other than the school system,
but I don't. That doesn't hold water with me, because you know what? When you talk about people are scraping scraping by, etc. Yes, there are people who are impoverished in our city. There's no doubt about that. But are you saying to me that the people of Manchester are less well off than the people of Berlin, or Claremont, or Colebrook, or well, they're not. But they're spending less in their schools than those poor people there are spending.
Yeah.
Right. So we you go down Elm Street any day of the week, and or any night of the week, and there are some great things happening in this city. There's great restaurants, great nightlife. The Palace Theatre is full. Thanks be to God. Lovely. I love the place. There's stuff going on. We're building new hotels. The mill buildings are packed with people. There's people in here doing business every day. This picture that Manchester. I had to listen to this 15 years ago when I was being told that, we have to tighten our belts, etc. Well, New Hampshire's got an unemployment rate of 2.2 or 3%. We are the fifth, sixth, or seventh richest state in the United States of America. And on a per capita basis, on a per person personal income basis, and yet in the city of Manchester, we spend less on our school kids' education than the average citizen of the United States does. That's how far behind we are. And just since you went to Memorial, if you just look at where we used to be on the lower end of the school districts in the state. Then we got to close to the bottom. Then we got to the bottom, and then we fell off almost into a category all our own. So we ask our kids to go into school. The band uniforms at Central High School, I became aware of this just in the last 2 weeks, that the uniforms that the kids wear at Central High School, that they've been there since 1995. The kids who are in their 40s, almost as old as you and me, people in their 40s and 50s were marching down Elm Street in the same uniforms as our poor children are marching in today. Is nobody in Manchester has the decency to be embarrassed that this is going on? And yet we have self-righteous...
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So are you saying that a kid can't get a good education in Manchester? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, I'll tell you this. They can get a good education in Manchester if they have it all going for them. But here's the thing. That top, whatever the number is, I'm going to call it 20%. Here's what the most damning thing I could say about Manchester School District. And I'm high on it because lots of great things happen with great kids and great teachers and people trying hard, and there are successes happening. I talked about one while ago about the cello player, the soccer player the week before. But I'll tell you what the thing is. When you get a kid comes out of whatever school it might be, here in the north end of Manchester, near where I live, Webster, Smith Road or whatever, goes into Hillside into Central, or on the west side going through that system, etc. You can pretty much predict almost where they're going to come out on the far end. The bottom line is that the parents, if they're at home with a reasonably stable home life, and when they come home at night, there's food on the table and the electricity works and the lights go on, and they're able to they have paper and a pencil or a computer to work with, and parents who say, "Did you get your homework done? And do you need help with that?" Those kids do great. I have 3 kids. I have 4 children, but 3 of them are in university right now. All 3 of them are the product of the Manchester public school system, and I'm very proud of them. But and when I look at some members of the school board that we look at, and many of their kids, when you look around the school board and you look at the people there, and they should be proud of the achievements of their children. There are school board members whose kids have done great. Out of the Manchester School District, but it should be no surprise. Those kids weren't the challenge. It's the kids who are challenged are the ones that we fail, and they're the ones that concern me the most, because I was.
The kids that don't have parents to back them up.
They don't have parents. They don't have proper housing. They don't have parental support.
That has nothing to do with how much money you spend on per child in the city.
Well, I'll tell you.
That's a parental thing. That means their parents haven't done what they're supposed to do for their children.
So what should we do? What should we do with those kids?
I don't know.
Well, I can tell you that's I know statistics are awful things for some people, and I'm just saying, like, for every dollar that we spend on early childhood education, for instance, or on intervention with these kids early in their school careers, for every dollar that we spend, we save the city and the state between anywhere from $2 to $6 in spending later on in their lives. So every dollar we spend in education means that you and me are saving money. Right, when we're relying on others to look after us, and in 10 years from now, these people are going to be very expensive if they haven't been educated and they don't have the ability to get good jobs, and therefore they're going to be a burden on you and me. So we as a society owe it to these kids to actually do what we can for them. And I'm not talking about giving them all kinds of special things. I'm just talking about the basics. Like, even the gifted kids in Manchester, you talk about a great education. We have no gifted and talented program for gifted and talented kids in the city of Manchester. There isn't one. So if you happen to have a kid who's, of semi-genius material or something, there is no program for him in Manchester. And as I've said on this show many times, it really annoys me, and you haven't gone there tonight, but it disturbs me when people say, look, about academic outcomes or something, and when we go in and we remove, vast numbers of programs from kids and reduce their choices and what they can do, and then we say, how come the academic results aren't better? I'll give you an example of my 4th child as an example, who goes to Manchester school system. He went to the Manchester school system. In the middle schools in Manchester, we had no foreign language at all. the only school district perhaps in the whole New England region maybe, but certainly in the state of New Hampshire, where there was no foreign language of any kind. We when Ted Gatsis was mayor, when we fired 160 teachers, some of whom we rehired, but we eliminated all foreign languages in our middle schools. And so that he went there, he didn't get any. He goes into Central High School. He has 1 year of foreign language at high school. In his sophomore year, he's told that there's a clash in the schedule. He can't. He's doing bands, so there isn't because the classes are stripped down to the bare minimum. There isn't a class available for him, so he does VLAX. Right, so let's do it at home and do it over the computer. So Manchester School District has given him. And here he is in his junior year. He's had 1 year of actually having a foreign language teacher teaching him in a classroom. And then if you scrape this in the dirty little secret that nobody likes to talk about because we like to con people about it, we reintroduced the one language, Spanish, into our middle schools. And what we do is we have half a teacher driving from one school to the other, spending a half a day in each of the in the middle schools, so that at least some of the kids can have a foreign language. But the fact is, if every kid at Parkside or Southside tomorrow said, "Oh, we'd all like to do Spanish sometime in the 3 years while we're here," guess what? The answer is no, because we don't have enough. We hired 2 teachers for about 3,600 kids in middle school. And that's what we did. So we'd be able to check the box off that says, oh, we have foreign languages in middle schools too. Now, in fairness to Dr. Vargas, he was willing to state categorically that not having foreign language in the middle school was educationally unsound. And it is not right that the kids in Hooksett, who took their kids and went elsewhere, that the kids in Hooksett have foreign languages in middle school, in Londonderry, in Derry, in Bedford, in Wyndham, in Goffstown, in New Boston, in every town, they all get it. But in Manchester, no, because the taxpayers of Manchester insist on having the cheapest schools in the state, and some of the people you say, we've got smart fellas over there, and there's women there too, by the way, we've got smart people over at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen has systematically underfunded our schools for the last couple of decades. And they continue to do it. And by the way, sir, they have no intention of fixing it this year. We're going to have a discussion about a $2.5 million deficit. The teachers haven't had a pay increase for the last 12 months. There's no plan right now. We're still negotiating. And there's no plan in place to fix it, and we're fine with that. But as I've said many times, if we had the cheapest, and I'm a big fire and police and everything else guy, but if we had fire trucks driving around Manchester that were all rusted out, and there was one guy on each truck, and we had eliminated a bunch of people over the years, and we had the highest percentage of, fire, whatever, in the state, there'd be aldermen who'd be bouncing from one side of the seat to the other to make sure it got fixed. The dirty little secret is, is that it turns out that if you have money, of course, in Manchester, you can send your kids to a wonderful school like Derryfield and spend $30,000 a year over there if you want to do it. If you're a public representative in Manchester, you take your kids, you put them in private school, or else what you do is, and some of them were friends of mine, is you serve on the school board, and as soon as your kids are ready to go to school, what do? You move out. You go to some other town. Because you're not going to put them in the Manchester school system, because the Manchester school system isn't for people like you and me. That's for nod, wink, wink. That's for other people. So I just think that it, to me, I've talked before about the city of Dover as an example. Dover's no more precious than Manchester is. Manchester should, stand up straight and throw its shoulders back and its chest out and say, we are the Queen City. We are the city, the urban area in the great state of New Hampshire. We should be loud and we should be proud. Instead of apologizing, and it takes Dover, comes around, it raises $85 million to build a new high school and advertises itself as people of Massachusetts and elsewhere and New Hampshire come to the great city of Dover. We've got the brand new high school. We've got the best high school in the state. Come and visit us and live here. This is a destination. And in Manchester, we've got Dyn, and we've got Autodesk, and we've got now BAE Systems, and we've got lots of things happening in the city, and great nightlife and restaurants and business and entrepreneurs and lots of things to be proud about. But when it comes to our schools, we have people in our school district who are fundamentally opposed to public education. And that's just why I come here every week. and fight for it, because it's a wrong that ought to be fixed. And I'd love to be having a conversation with someone like you, talking about how do we stop the rot, so to speak, and how do we actually find a way to fund these things properly. And we could start with people who are passing the costs of education from the from the State House down to the City of Manchester. And so it's wonderful. You mentioned Rich Gerard as an example. It's wonderful, to be up in Concord wearing your yellow scarf, talking about funding private schools and taking money out of the public school system to fund private schools, and then be down here talking about how we're going to reduce more programs. I mean, today, remember, in the city, it'd be something that is little spoken about because it was passed 4 years ago. If you've got a business in the state of New Hampshire today, you can take instead of paying your taxes to pay for roads and schools and buildings and all the things that government does, you can take your taxes and you can donate them to a private organisation so they can send their kids, either homeschool them or send them to a religious school or a private school. So if you happen to be a multi-millionaire businessman over on the seacoast or in Rye, and you owe the state of New Hampshire $500,000 in taxes for your business for the year, you could decide to pay for 20 scholarships for $10,000 each, and spend $200,000 of it on your buddies who are going to schools like the Derryfield at $30,000 a year. And guess who's paying for it? Guess who's paying for it?
Well,
you and me.
You're like most ready to go, I guess. You guys
we are.
Going to be leaving the program, but I just wanted to call, let you know that.
There's another view. I get it, and I appreciate you calling in.
School system, but I understand where you're coming from. But we could save some money in certain areas if we want to.
Well, I hope we could. There's been a long list of people come into Manchester school. I think about Dave Whibby as an example. A guy who's quite clever and a man of numbers, and he came in, and he I don't mean to deride him in any way at all, but he came in, as I understand it, with the best of intentions, and he was going to look through the spreadsheets and find where the monies were to be saved. Guess what? He left after 2 terms. See you later. He didn't find any money that could be saved, and he was the last and another in a long line of people who've come in to do the same thing. In the end, when you're spending less than everybody else, either all the other people in the state are stupid and spending money stupidly, or you're not. I hope I haven't talked at you too much. I really appreciate your call tonight, and thank you very much. And we'll do it again. I have to depart.
Right, have a good night.
Thank you, and thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, so that gentleman, I am grateful to him for calling. Let me just show we. Thank you again, sir. We went on for a long time, I know, but a lot of what he had to say, reasonable people with reasonable opinions. We need to be able to talk to each other, and so we reach some new understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of another night. We took up most of it with that. I have my list of the things that are going on and not here. But I'll let that go until next week. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and a great week, and I'll see you all again next week. Thank you and good night from Jim O'Connell.